We will call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on claims.
Claims this evening are $13,751,045.12. That is because we paid the other taxing jurisdictions for their portion of the property taxes of $12,570,380.75.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on regular operators licenses.
Tonight, you're asked to recommend approval of one regular operator license for the period of February 25th, 2019 to June 30th, 2020 to Sarah Edwards, contingent on payment of any outstanding debt owed to the city and successful completion of the background check.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on temporary beer wine license for the Hudson Rotary Club for May 23rd, 2019.
I'll move we approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on temporary beer wine license for the Hudson Hockey Association for March 30th, 2019.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on vehicle lease for Hudson Fire Department. Chief?
Honorable Mayor, Finance Committee members, we had budgeted for in 2019 for leasing a vehicle for the chief, and we went out and solicited some bids, and we came back with a low bid from Hudson Chrysler at $373 a month. The budget we had for 2019 was $440 a month, so it's a little bit under budget, and it was cheaper than the comparable enterprise.
Okay.
What kind of vehicle are you getting for that?
It is a Jeep Cherokee.
Is it red?
I think it's going to be white.
Have we leased before?
No, we haven't. The police have been leasing for a while, and at this point with our capital budget and that, we thought it'd be a good point to lease one for 3 years and then see where we're at as far as staffing and everything else to what we may or may not want to purchase instead of committing, kind of see what it looks like. So it's kind of
I know they put mileage caps on leasing. That's not an issue.
it shouldn't be. It's 15,000 miles a year, so that should be fine.
Cool. Not taking many trips with it.
No.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion possible action on appointment of interim finance director. So we can talk about that right now.
I don't know if anybody has any questions. I had sent out an email to everybody, just kind of, this will, if there's any documentation or whatever, that way there'll be someone to execute the documents.
I'll make the motion to appoint Devin as the interim finance director slash treasurer effective March 1st until a new finance director slash treasurer begins employment with the city.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion.
Is, do you have a time frame of what you're trying to accomplish?
I mean, as far as hiring, the apps are due back March 11th, which is I figured we made it 6 o'clock that night for finance, go through them, and then hopefully that following week, maybe early in that following week, get interviews, depending on what applications come in, so that we're.
Did you open the ad already?
Yep, I mean, the Monday after Rich, normally we would go through the thing where you'd okay it and stuff, but Rich thought we should get moving on it, so we didn't figure there would be any opposition, so.
Okay.
So we should, if all goes well, maybe mid-April.
Okay.
If depending on how quickly we're able to find someone and their timetable wherever they're at, so.
I have a question. I'm wondering if there's any recommendations from the sitting finance officer about our next hire? Any recommendations or insights to what type of personnel we should be looking for, somebody's qualifications, et cetera?
Well, I had briefly talked to the mayor that I'd like to do an exit interview, and I thought as part of that exit interview, I could give some qualifications that I thought would be helpful.
Cool.
And there's been a few interview questions that Brenda and I have talked about adding to what we did last time. Just a couple things she's mentioned to me.
And with the exit interview, I requested from the mayor that one council member also be in that exit interview.
When is it scheduled?
We haven't scheduled it yet.
Would it make sense to have the finance committee do that exit interview, or is that,
Well, you had set up the format, but I mean, that's kind of up to you guys. I mean, you
Yeah.
approved that form and everything for, but
gotcha. I
you'd
just
have
wanted to
to,
throw
I
it
mean,
out.
if you wanted to, that's fine, you'd have to notice it.
Oh, well, that, all right.
Because it would have to be a public meeting.
Correct. I
That,
mean, you could do it in closed session.
pretty
if you
much,
wanted
yeah,
to.
of closed session.
But-
yeah.
Got it.
But normally, I mean, you can do whatever you'd like, but if, you know, it could just be one member of the committee too, if that's what Brenda would like. So.
I think it's gonna depend on when you've got it scheduled for, who's available, and, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, you know.
Well,
if
Rich
I'm
can let me
available,
know,
I'm-
and then I
I'm
can
willing.
reach out to the committee, and then,
Yep.
Or, do the two of you want to, do you want it noticed and have it as a closed session meeting?
It'd be up to you, you know,
Do you think it's
I don't
necessary?
think it's necessary.
to have all three. You just want one council person?
Okay. All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on dive team finances.
This is somewhat came out of public safety. We wanted, and previous conversations we've had at council. Glenn Hartman is here, who's kind of been the, I guess, the leader of the dive team up till now. So the question was put to him, what do we do with the dive team if EMS is no longer, our St. Croix EMS is no longer? So I'd asked Glenn to put some numbers together to give us a starting talking point at where best to put the dive team, whether, and we can't obviously answer the EMS question, but would it go under the police department or could it go under the fire department? So with that, Glenn, if you want to go through what you handed out.
Thank you. So you'll notice on the first page, I just had a transitional proposal, Hudson Rescue Dive Team, and there's 8 points there that are just kind of discussion points like Mr. Morissette talked about. So recommendation for transition to fire, police, or remaining with EMS. Discussions regarding a police-based reserve program versus full-time officers. I've not had a chance to review that with Jeff Willems. But that is definitely a discussion point that I'm going to need to, to really give you a well-rounded recommendation as far as where it should go. And then discussion regarding the rescue divers recovery system and the Swiftwater component that's also a part of the dive team. So there's also a Swiftwater rescue part of this. Myself and the fire chief Scott and I sat down and we've talked about this several times over the past year, even before the discussion of EMS came up, just as kind of more just the future of the dive team and other topics. But so I have had a chance to talk to Chief St. Martin about that. So I have some thoughts on that, in the future, if you would like to discuss that. So the other thing is number 4, current budget and equipment costs. So I've included that, and it looks like, I had a chance to look that over. It looks like the EMS chief, he put in, essentially, Josh gave me, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 years of what they typically budgeted for equipment costs and replacement and whatnot. So it's started out at about $3,000, so it's fluctuated between like $3,000 and $5,000 over the years. So it looks like this, in 2018, Josh put about $5,100 in there for just replacement of equipment. And that seemed to be a fairly good amount. Obviously, the equipment that we purchased when we first put the dive team together was bought in one lump sum through donations that I had acquired at that time, in 2000. So it's been just basically replacement of those, the equipment as it's worn out. So we've through donations and whatnot, our community, we have a state-of-the-art underwater communication system that we have that's robust and fine. So there really isn't, as far as a large startup per se, but rather more of just a kind of a continuation of the existing system. Now, there does need to be some discussion about if the fire department decides this is something that they are interested in, then the boat would probably be an issue for them, given the fact that the police department uses the boat currently as a part of their, law enforcement regiment. So it probably wouldn't work for fire. But Scott could probably talk a little bit more about that. Training costs for new divers. Well, let's back up on number 4. So I guess I put in the equipment total, $9,300. So if you were to take a brand new diver, a person with no experience, and outfit that diver, training, outfitting them, equipping them, you're looking at about $9,000. It's not a
Per diver.
per diver. Yep.
What kind of turnover do we have in that?
We don't have a lot of turnover. I've probably had many of the, we don't have a huge turnover of divers. I've got about a staff of about 10 divers right now, and we've probably replaced a half a dozen or so over the past 19 years. So these are they're all volunteers. They from around the county. Many of them are already many of them are firefighters with other jurisdictions. We've had police officers on our team in the past. I have a police officer on the team now. One of our officers from the Hudson Police Department is one of my divers. So,
What does that makeup, I'm sorry, what does that makeup look like from your staffing? How many of your dive team staff are staff of Hudson, either PD or fire department?
there's just 2 of us right now that are with the Hudson Police Department. I've had past divers from the fire department. They're still employed on the fire department, but they just are no longer on the dive team.
Gotcha.
The EMS has, obviously 2 divers. Josh was a past diver. He takes more of a support role now. Mr. Petit is one of our divers, so.
Gotcha. So there's currently, is that 3 staff?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the rest are made up of divers from just around the county, because when I first started the team, much of the money that we got was from United Way. And the agreement was at that time was to respond through the entire county. So we were the only dive team that was really available at that time. So we just agreed that if there was a mutual aid request from any jurisdiction in St. Croix County, that we would respond. Now, the county has, St. Croix County Sheriff's Department has started a dive team. I don't know how robust it is any longer, but theirs is more of a underwater investigation and recovery perspective versus ours, which is rescue and recovery. And so we have divers that are also trained in underwater crime scene investigation, of which I'm one of those divers. So one of the costs that you'll see also on there is the training costs for new divers. Now, there really isn't a training cost for new divers from the standpoint of cost from the instructor, because I'm the instructor. So I completed that training some years ago. So training the divers, as long as I'm still involved on the team, there's no cost related to, labor costs, I should say, relating to training the divers. So, and that's been extended to existing EMS staff. So if somebody wants to become a diver that's on St. Croix EMS, I just train them if they're interested in becoming divers. Now, there are costs, incidental costs, for the certification, to pay for the certification. That's not my, it's not my part of my control. But once they become an open water diver, then there is a requirement of other certifications they need to acquire. Advanced, ice diver, rescue diver, and then crime scene, ultimately, if that's something that we want to pursue, especially if it goes to the police department.
Out of curiosity, does the dive team in and of itself have any sort of licensure that falls under EMS currently, or is it more of just a certification per diver?
Yes, it would be a certification per diver, and of course, they're hired on, they're an employee of the city, obviously, from the standpoint of, any costs relating to workman's comp or something along those lines where they become injured. Yes, the amount that they're paid is a stipend. I believe it's about $20, I believe, is what Josh pays each diver if they go out on a call, and that's whether or not they're there for an hour or they're there all night.
So just on the dive team roster, there's maybe 8 or 10, just trying to remember, are those, you said there's 3 that are divers, what are, the rest that are on the dive team, what's their role? Because there's like 10 of them, I think, on the payroll, 8 or 10.
Yeah, so some of them are in a support role.
Okay.
So we've got support divers as well, so they might be dive team, their support staff, the dive tenders. So fire has helped us out in that, with our existing team, they've helped us with dive tenders. So that is a little bit different role, but that's a role that doesn't require really equipping them per se. It's just a body, and then they're trained on how to manage the ropes while the diver's in the water.
So Glenn, is the hang-up with the boat kind of putting the question of where you want to house it in your mind, the police department or the fire? Is the hang-up of the boat?
There's no hang-up. I think what it is there's probably just two, the fire department, Scott can speak more, probably more clearly to this, but when we first purchased the boat, there was a discussion about doing a kind of a partnership with the fire department and putting a pumper on the front of it, a fire suppression system on it. And they just opted at that time not to move forward with that. Well, the police department and EMS recognized we needed some, just because our call volume was going up and up out on the river as far as rescue calls, medicals out to the islands. I mean, it was just something, crimes that were being committed. It was getting more and more difficult to just commandeer a boat or to wait for one of the county deputies to show up. So at that time, it was a very smart move. The boat has been, a critical part of our role. So, but to answer your question, I think what you're getting at, I don't know if it's necessarily a hang-up. I just think if it did go to fire, I'm not certain that the existing boat would work for what they need.
Your boat, you're talking about the inflatable?
No, I'm talking about the police EMS boat.
Oh, the police, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are really 3 main questions that I think that we need to answer. One, obviously, is do we keep a dive team? 2 is where do we house it? And 3 is, can we budget it? I guess my opinion would be, probably the fire department in my head, but yes, we house it in, and then the budget is completely doable because I don't think we can have without a dive team living on a river like this. And most people who spend the summers out there, we need that.
It's an insurance policy, especially given the fact that the Duchess and, Afton Cruise Lines have just, are now leaving out of our dock. Those are several hundred people that are floating around on the river. And there's if you go Google the Sea Wing disaster, which was the turn of the century where hundreds of people were killed when a storm came up, it was the largest inland death, a number of people dying on a boat, was here in this area, was down in Red Wing.
If I recall, we had a mass mutual tabletop exercise with everybody in the county on this, and I think we scored higher because we actually did have a dive team. And that was the actual accident. That was it. One of the boats went down, and we scored pretty high with that.
Yeah. It's an insurance policy. Obviously, we don't do, I mean, we do about a half a dozen call-outs a year for a variety of different reasons. We do get called for mutual aid around the county, but it's
Yeah.
it's definitely needed. It's something I feel is important for our community. You know, we were the only volunteer team that dove on the I-35 bridge collapse, the only volunteer team. It was a great honor, and it was a great experience for us. We have very, very talented and professional divers, so.
Randy, why do you suggest that it be put under fire? You know, they're using it for crime scene investigation as well as other things. Why not police?
To me, dive and rescue, to me, goes with the fire
Fire
department.
department, okay.
Come on up, Scott, and your opinion. Just to me, in my mind, it fits.
And this is just very, very early on in talking about this, and Glenn and I have talked about it, and a couple of the main things are, you know, they've kind of, from what I see, have kind of been their own entity over the years, worked under the guise of EMS. So if that's the proposal, basically they just kind of work under whoever, whether it's police or us, and keep their same format they use is one thing. Now, then the whole other thing is if they become part of the police department or part of the fire department, and then we're more responsible for operations, it's, you know, then it takes a whole different look, and we would look at it in a kind of a whole different way, how we would meld it into our system and how we feel it would fit. So I think that one of the decisions the council needs to make is, do you want to basically keep it as it is now, and maybe even, I don't really see a big issue why they couldn't keep it on their own as a dive team.
Big issue would be where the budget would go.
And that's the question. My only, we took over rescue back when I first arrived here, and kind of did it because it needed to be done, and all the parties agreed. We did it without really taking any budgetary concerns either. We inherited some equipment, and it's been challenging for training and everything else with us. So before we would take something like this on, we'd have to have some big discussions on, are they going to be firefighters and all that, or is this going to be a separate entity like it's been successful running kind of on its own? So we're by no means looking to take anything over, and it's decisions.
We need to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
That was my first
Yeah.
thought.
But I mean, I think when you decide that, you have to know what it's going to look like. Is it going to basically stay a department on its own and just maybe a sub-department where it doesn't much matter where it goes?
So Chief,
Or-
is this your pushback that you want the police department to have it?
No, not at all, but I think Glenn agrees I think it's an important part of this public safety, but how you integrate it into either department, or do you kind of keep it on its own? And that's the question, I guess, that we pose to you. If they're successful on their own, do they need to be underneath somebody, or do you want to keep that entity basically separate? Or do you want to, and and I've talked to Glenn about, is if it's going to be a fully part of the fire department, then it kind of opens up a lot of other things we have to talk about, and it's under the guise of my, managing it, and along with our other staff, and we have our hierarchy of assistant chiefs and everything else. So that's just some of the things I think you need to think about when you're doing it. So, and I guess that's, if they're successful now, I don't know, do you
It
need
ain't
to
broke,
put
don't
mixed-
fix it. right?
Well, that's,
What changes need to be made?
So
and
what,
that's what I don't know. I mean, that's,
in my opinion, a lot of this comes down to the boat, and I could be wrong. But right now you're using the fire, or the EMS fireboat,
Police boat.
police boat. We don't have a fireboat, do we? We,
Thought we did.
so as long as we're on that subject.
yeah, I know.
Can I ask you a
Of course, we
question,
had one
Glenn?
heck of a fire out there last year that we brought boats in from Stillwater to put that thing out. So, Glenn, do you have a preference where it would go? I'm sure that dive teams, well, first of all, let me just say this. We need a dive team here. I agree with Randy. We have to have the dive team. So, I know that they belong throughout the municipalities here on the river, on water, that they kind of are all over the map. They could be with the fire, they could be with police. Which one do you think works?
I do have my preference, but I think that it makes more sense to be with fire from the standpoint of budgeting, frankly. So if it goes with the police department, the police chief is gonna have to decide whether or not he's gonna use full-time officers, which runs into a whole overtime issue, which is huge, versus him maybe taking a look at a reserve program, a CSO program. So there's a lot of opportunities I could see where the chief could probably use that as an opportunity to maybe open up some of those other doors, and it affords an option. My concern with police is that with, budgets sometimes, when there's critical issues with budgets and there's going to be cutting that's going to be happening, I think that it's hard to justify a dive team because it's not a revenue-based system. It's expensive. And
I don't know
whereas-
that you're going to have an argument here from anybody. We're a river town. We need to have a dive team.
I've been a public safety, all my life. I've been a firefighter, police officer, EMT. So it's difficult for me to assess that without really knowing what the preference is of the police chief as far as how that program would look.
Okay.
But I mean, my gut would be is that, like Mr. Morissette outlined, it's a rescue system. We're made up of public safety rescue divers. There is a underwater crime scene component to it. We've been involved with that. We were asked by the St. Paul Police Department. We recovered 2 handguns that were used in a homicide. So that became very critical when we recovered those handguns. So there is also a public, a law enforcement perspective to it as well.
All right. Well,
I have one quick question. Budget-wise, you're saying 5,000 or whatever. What are you anticipating the budget would be? Because you're saying that would make a difference on.
We're right now, as far as equipment, we're where we need to be.
Okay.
So I don't anticipate, other than replacing some equipment here or there.
Okay.
Operations would be separate from a department, right? Is what you're getting at?
Well, I'm wondering, right now, they've budgeted 5,000 for the last several years.
Never been a problem. We've
No.
always had enough money.
Whether you as a group are looking at finding I'm just saying, $50,000 a year, $20,000 a year, you were saying, where are we going to find the money? Where are we going to, what department are we going to put it in?
Well, if it's in EMS, right?
Right, but
So we would
but the question is if it's 5,000 versus 50,000, that,
And one last thing I just leave you with, because I know you got to get going, is my role as well. So how is my role going to be seen moving forward? So with the fire department, like the fire chief talked about, he has a different hierarchy and how they're set up. If I suddenly come in, I'm not a firefighter. So how would I fit into that? I could see where there'd be some concern. Whereas on the police department, my role is already fairly well defined. So.
Can I ask
real brief, Glenn, what's the future of our dive team look like? How easy is it to recruit? Do we have any issues with anything like that?
No, the thing is about public safety diving, it's kind of a, it's something that's very exciting until they train every month, and we train every month. So we're a very robust training. It has to be that way for a lot, variety of different reasons. So that's the other part of all this. But it's not hard to recruit people at all. It's hard to retain them because of the commitment. It's a huge time commitment. So, that's the other part. But I agree with you. I'm glad to hear that you feel that the dive team is important for our community. It is very important. We have recovered. We have managed to revive people, though that is very unusual. We have managed to revive people, and that's a huge part of the joy that we get out of it, and retrieving loved ones. That's happens just about every year. So,
How much time do you spend approximately each week or each month on this? And I mean, I'm assuming that it's part of your salary as a police.
no, it's not a part of my police salary, because if it would, I think you guys would know that, because it would be huge. No, my
So do we need to thank you for volunteer time?
No, I need to thank you for for settling our contract too. By the way, it was very nice of council. Thank you very much. But On the volunteer side, it's a lot of hours. It's an enormous amount of time, but it is a labor of love. I started the dive team as a result of Ainsley Sterninsky drowning, if those of you remember Ainsley. And we just didn't have anything. And so the reason we did it was for righteous reasons, and then look what it turned into. I mean, look what happened with I-35, and it's just been a great experience. I don't want to see it go away, so I'm very glad to hear that this is something we want to move forward on. I think it'll be very easy for us to sit down with the chiefs and figure out a plan. Not much of a problem, with a minimal amount of impact. One last thing I do want to say is I'm working on a 501c3 right now, the St. Croix Public Safety Alliance. So we're hoping that we can get a robust amount of money coming into that to help support some of these, not only the dive team, Swiftwater, but all of public safety. So that's the reason why I started that and working on that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, if you want to move it back to public safety so we can
Sure.
have the conversations with the chiefs, we can develop a plan and
Good.
hopefully decide a recommendation of what department to put it.
All right, we'll do that. Send it back.
So move.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to send this back to public safety. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Glenn, thank you for the presentation. It's good to get an update on what's going on. I think everybody's happy to hear about that. All right, you have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.